Welcome in to the RotoWire NFL podcast, brought to you by our friends over at WinBet. I'm your host, John McKechnie, joined, as always, by Mario Puig. Mario, it appears that do you work at RotoWire? Are you just decked out? Did you just get some free merch?
Oh, well, so it's a stupid story, but for the people who are just listening to the podcast and don't stream this, I'm wearing a RotoWire hat. Normally I wear like a Brewers hat if I'm wearing a hat, but I put my Brewers hats, the two of them, two different colors of them, in the wash because they're disgusting. It's summer here. I've been wearing them too much, but I'm stupid and too lazy to finish tasks, so I forgot to do the laundry. So they were sitting there, and I just came to the office without a hat. But I had to shave my head recently. I don't get haircuts. Like the last haircut that I got was like in 2007 or something like that. I wait basically like 2 points in a year and just shave off my hair entirely, and then it grows back, and eventually I need to cut it again. But I just cut it, and particularly in these lights, it's a bit bright, and I wasn't going to go hatless for this particular episode, so I grabbed this RotoWire, almost like a prop hat, really, that we keep around like the memorabilia and stuff, and it's mine now.
We could have, tried to hook you up with some spider tack to like put on your head to reduce the glare or something.
Catch more lint.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of memorabilia, and for all those people watching, it's like I found all these. My mom found and sent to me all these old cards that I got from the.
Look at that.
1999. That's a Tim Couch Topps Finest with the.
Mama!
The lamination thing still on it. Yeah, I noticed these things aren't worth so much apparently anymore. That they're not like this Fred Taylor rookie card. It says $15. Not so much anymore. Maybe in like 2000 or something. But as I understand it, that if you get them graded by PSA and they're a 10, that opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. So Marvin Harrison right here. Yeah, I'm thinking we got some PSA 10s here, John, and we can probably start some sort of, delightful fund of some kind with the proceeds of that, and
yes,
make a lot more money or buy lots of treats with it, something like that.
Yeah, buy more entries to best ball, and I don't know, go on riverboat gambling trips.
Got the Ron Dane for Nick Whalen whenever he comes in next. You can have that, Nick. I assume you're listening to this.
Of course. And I still got the DJ Moore Maryland card that you gifted to me so graciously.
That's a contemporary card, obviously. I got that because I was like trapped in a Milwaukee mall for like 4 hours and just bought a box out of boredom. But these are all from 1999 era, 2000, back when football was really good.
That I agree. Golden age. I mean, Jamal Lewis just running through people, just being a top 10 pick. I mean, can you imagine these days the people would go?
They took him at the top 5 right after he tore his ACL at Tennessee too. So, yeah.
Did Thomas Jones go right before him too, or right after?
That might be right. I can't remember exactly, but that sounds about right. Yeah.
Oh man, the golden years. Used to go to the Ravens Stadium when the draft was like basically all one day, except for a little bit on Sunday. Yeah, and just run around on the field and like I don't know, throw a football as hard as I can at some inflatable thing. Good times. But so concludes our card breakdown segment of the RotoWire NFL podcast. There's some news to get into, Mario. There's been a lot going on this week. I want to start things out with some quarterback battles that have been settled. Starting back to Monday night, the Jaguars obviously did not look great, and we'll get to the ETN stuff here in a little bit. But even still, Trevor Lawrence, shockingly, still wins the quarterback job for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So your thoughts on that?
Well, it must have been close, John, for it to come this close down to the wire. What can you say? Gardner Minshew must be almost as good as Trevor Lawrence. Maybe Trevor Lawrence is bad. I don't know. I actually don't really think much of it at all. I think Urban Meyer's probably a goofy guy. He probably has some silly ideas about how he should do this new job of his that isn't especially similar to his last one. So he's probably flailing a bit, trying to figure out how to establish authority and coming across as like a serious manager of, his workers, I guess they are now. I don't know what he meant to do. It seemed to mostly just confuse people and alienate people. And I guess it could have hurt Trevor Lawrence's preparation somewhat, getting some amount of reps with the number 2 team instead of the number 1. I guess we'll see. I still don't really care that much for fantasy purposes, just because I thought Lawrence and his pass catchers were already priced as if we were assuming this was a less than well-run team.
Yep.
I think for their cumulative talent, they were going a bit later than peers for similarly projected offenses, or I don't know. That's how I saw it anyway. So I definitely am not an Urban Meyer fan. That's not why I'm high on the Jags. Just has to do with talent and the price, I guess, for now anyway.
Yeah, I'm starting to go back to where I initially felt about the Urban Meyer hire, and obviously, like, you can't fully base things off of a preseason or anything like that, but man,
he does not deserve a benefit of the doubt. It's fine, yeah.
And even they talked about it on the broadcast how they have the easiest opening month of the season of any NFL team. I think they're still going to go 0-4. And I think that we're going to start to see a situation brewing come November where, like, if the Jags are like still hunting for their first win or their second win by that time, I don't know if Urban can handle it. He looked like he was already like back to the sidelines in College Park when Ohio State almost lost to Maryland his last year at Ohio State, just like that level of freaking out on Monday night in a preseason game. So I'm back to being fully on the thought that this Urban experiment in Jacksonville is probably not going to last beyond this year. And I won't be completely shocked if he doesn't even make it the whole season.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm not really inclined to try to figure out anything in particular from preseason stuff. So his team struggling in a preseason game, I guess he could have been sincerely mad about it, distraught about it. I still don't really care about preseason stuff. Like, to me, the cause for concern around Urban Meyer just has to do with things we already knew about him before the preseason and things that we have reason to believe are true about him. So preseason like these preseason spectacles with him and the Jags looking bad, to me, that's just kind of like a reminder of what you should have already known. And I don't know if it's a reason to like up the level of concern that already could have been sort of accounted for, but we'll see. I mean, I do not think the guy was a good hire at all. I think Shad Khan is a imbecile. I mean, it's not a good process that led to this outcome. It's not like there's a sound basis for any of this. Even if it does work out, it's kind of by dumb, just random luck, really, because Khan didn't know what he was doing, and he doesn't have any qualifications to handle, the hiring of a coach or whatever, and yet he just locked on to Urban Meyer right away. It was just sort of right up front, like, we're going to pay whatever it takes to get Urban Meyer, and that's a weird carpet to pull out for Urban Meyer. It's like I get maybe trying to recruit him to the NFL, but it's not Bill Parcells or something. What would he bringing out all these, trying to tempt him in with new facilities? Even it's just ridiculous, and it's something only a dumb guy thinks of.
Yeah, he's not Jimmy Johnson either. I mean, we've seen great college coaches totally fail at this level, and if you can, there are certain qualifications or certain qualities that certain college coaches could probably bring over to the NFL. But Urban always felt like a guy that was distinctly cut out for college. So consider me skeptical, and that strength coach hiring right off the bat that they had to walk back with was a pretty bad sign, I thought. So
that was insane.
Not good. Okay, let's get on over to another battle that has since been settled since we last talked. The Broncos ended up going Teddy Bridgewater. So I had kind of been I had been thinking that Drew Lock, despite his warts, I felt like his ability to at least try to push the ball down the field might be something that opens things up for this offense. Obviously, the Broncos and Vic Fangio felt a different way, and Bridgewater, of course, outperformed him thus far in camp and in preseason. So, I mean, it's not like the craziest thing in the world to happen to me, but I feel like we know what Teddy Bridgewater is at this point, and he's a pretty good quarterback, and maybe that's just enough for the Broncos at this stage, with the rest of the roster being as good as it is. And Locke, while he might have the more theoretical upside, Bridgewater, his floor is so much higher. He's not going to just straight up lose you games the way that Drew Lock can. So the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I'm not like over the moon about it, but I still think that the Broncos' skill guys, particularly in the passing game, are guys to target. I've felt like they've been kind of underpriced in ADP all along, and I think Jerry Jeudy is going to have a massive season regardless of who's back there.
Yeah, I think this could be good for Jerry Jeudy. It might not matter really. I think he was going to be fine either way.
Yeah.
But there is definitely something to be said for the sort of reliability that Bridgewater offers. It's not necessarily a desirable reliability. You're looking at a lot of field goals with that guy, but at least you're looking at field goals with Locke. You're looking at a whole host of natural disasters, and he does make good plays that Bridgewater can't. And I guess, specifically thinking velocity, distance of the passer, he's got to be a better athlete than Bridgewater, but Bridgewater, I didn't even know this until a couple days ago, but he ran for quite a bit last year and was really good at it. I don't think he's especially fast. Locke can actually run a little bit. But in any case, Locke is just, he's too much of a coin flip with all of his passes. It's not good for, it's good to have the big playability, of course. It's not great to have the sort of impotent quarterback play that Bridgewater will likely give them. But Drew Lock is so unstable and so unreliable that he can kind of, even if you have a great defense that's keeping you in the game, which they might have, Vic Fangio always gets his players to overachieve. Adding Pat Surtain to that corner rotation, having Darby and Callahan there, and there was somebody else that's pretty good if I remember right. So that's a lot of secondary talent. They've got some people to pass rush with, some depth at outside linebacker. If that defense is as good as it looks like it could be, then they will have kind of the luxury of kicking field goals, and it's going to be like, as long as Bridgewater gets Jeudy the ball, then they're moving the chains a little bit here and there. Maybe they get to the red zone and he can't seal the deal there, but even if so, they might have gotten further than Locke. And the defense, again, kind of, it's not going to perfectly protect Teddy Bridgewater, but it reduces the number of scenarios where he gets on the field feeling the need to score this drive and catch up this drive, because maybe he just can't do that. But Locke isn't guaranteed to be able to do that, and there's a lot of reason to believe Locke will do the more standard median range kind of plays much worse, very consistently worse than Bridgewater. So
right.
Yeah, 15 touchdowns in 15 games last year for Bridgewater, but he did have really good completion percentage and yards per target numbers to his three lead receivers. So Joe Brady might have had something to do with that, and I'm not going to assume Shermer's as good as Brady, but if Bridgewater's tendency in that one aspect carries over here, then it's good news for all the Denver pass catchers.
No, absolutely. And to your point about, what the kind of play-to-play expectancy for Drew Lock looks like compared to Bridgewater. Drew Lock ranked in the 4th percentile in bad pass percentage last year. So 25% of his passes were marked down as bad passes. That's fairly unplayable. I mean, again, that was only his second year. I think you can project some growth, but if the Broncos want to kind of get that window opened right now and get, start competing, not necessarily for a division title, of course, but get in the wild card race, get a playoff spot, that kind of thing. Bridgewater probably does give them a better chance of that, even if it's not particularly exciting.
I think he could be pretty good, because the running game isn't going to be dominant or anything, and yet they might just find themselves with the ball quite a bit. And you sit around long enough with guys like Jeudy and Sutton and Fant and Uquegbenum. I guess Patrick and Hamler look pretty good too. So if you just have the possession long enough with guys like that, someone's going to make a big play eventually, and they won't they could have almost sort of a check down heavy offense function like a 1B part to the running game, and just kind of be ball control, even while throwing quite a bit with a decent amount of spread formation. So I think it actually could work pretty well. And if Fangio gets the defense that he's capable of, they could be pretty tough. That's absolutely the case. We'll see, but that defense will be able to kind of keep them
in games for sure. There aren't many teams that are going to be able to just name their score against them. Not with the personnel like you mentioned, and not with the scheming up of a guy like Fangio. Let's get on over to another quarterback battle that's not completely settled yet, but I think is pretty close to being sutured up. That's down in New Orleans. So let's talk about the presumption maybe at this point that it should be or will be Jameis Winston. I think we both have kind of assumed that would be the way that things shook out this year, but it seems to be crystallizing right now. But it's been hard to predict what this offense is going to look like in general because they don't have Drew Brees anymore after 15 years, and no Michael Thomas. Adam Troutman gets hurt Monday night. I mean, we might be looking at Marquez Callaway, wide receiver 1 for the first month plus of the season.
Sorry, do we know when Traquan Smith is supposed to get back? He's just been out of practice for 6 weeks or something.
Yeah, right? Yeah, he's doing the Hollywood Brown.
Well, if he's back, I think he is probably the number 1 receiver. I know Callaway is doing well, and I liked Callaway enough as a prospect. I thought he would have made sense as a later round pick, but he does not seem like a wide receiver 1 type to me. I guess it's possible that Peyton can just make that happen when he wants to, and maybe Callaway's his guy. I guess we'll see. But yeah, Traquan, Marquez Callaway, what can this team do but chuck it deep to those two and give it to Alvin Kamara underneath? They have to. Their defense isn't even that good, so they're going to have to play catch up. They're going to have to assume that they're always a little bit behind the curve in these games this year because they kind of suck. They don't have much talent.
No, they really don't. It's been a situation where they weren't particularly deep at pass catchers at certain points during the last few years, but they just had so much dominant performances from guys like Michael Thomas to where it didn't matter so much what their third receiver looked like or anything like that. It's a totally new era here in New Orleans. Do we think that Jameis Winston is going to be able to kind of not necessarily tap back into what he did in Tampa Bay, but kind of evolve into a new quarterback under Peyton, someone who's you're not worried about throwing 1 pick 6 per week, that type of thing?
I don't know. He's not in a great situation there. I guess the offensive line is good. To be fair, probably a lot better than any offensive line he had in Tampa Bay. That's all that, aside from Peyton's play calling, otherwise, that's all that this offense really has going for it as far as the quarterback is concerned. Kamara's great. I actually still like Kamara quite a bit, and I like Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway both as long as their prices stay reasonable because I don't know who else is getting targets there. But that's not to say their potential upside in fantasy is enough to carry Winston. I guess it's worth considering if we're not optimistic on Winston, we should probably be worried about the possibility of him getting benched, which would be, I think, bad for the whole offense because Taysom Hill is, it's a wildcat offense. Yeah. So whatever. But yeah, that's the basic reality of it. It's you can't run a wildcat offense unless you have a lead, or at least unless you have a really good defense. And they don't have any reason to think the first will apply at many points this year. And the second, there's just, you can't lose. You can't go in with what did they lose? They lost Rankins at tackle. They lost Janoris
Patrick
Jenkins.
Robinson retired.
Yeah, their corners are pretty rough. That Paulson Adebo might be starting, and he's athletic, but that Stanford pass defense was trash. So we'll see. I kind of think they're just going to get, they're going to be vaguely competitive. I think because of their line and because Peyton, I think anyway, is a good coach, but they're just so weak personnel wise, and I think it's a little hasty to go chasing Jameis Winston in drafts. I think because even if things go relatively well for him, there's a pretty high probability that they're rotating in Taysom Hill in the red zone or something like that. So he might throw for 4,700 yards, but he might only have 18 touchdowns to show for it.
Boy, that would be absolutely brutal. So, not that you're necessarily targeting quarterbacks at this stage of the end game, but do you like Winston over a guy like Roethlisberger, Tyrod Taylor, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz?
Tyrod is one that maybe everybody should think about some more. I never thought he was good, but on that team, going to be behind all the time. He runs a little bit. I'm pretty interested in Tyrod Taylor, but I would probably also take Ben Roethlisberger over him, and I'm probably as low, on Roethlisberger as pretty much anybody. So that's saying something. I don't trust Winston to keep the job, and I am very much concerned that Taysom Hill, I don't know, scores half of the touchdowns between them, even though he only might play like a sixth as many snaps.
Yeah, it just kind of ruins the whole deal for everybody from a fantasy perspective. So yeah, that's definitely a concern to keep in mind. And then one more quarterback battle to get into. What's going on in your mind in New England? Obviously, Cam Newton comes back today after being away from the team for a couple days. What's kind of your expectation on how this shakes out? Was the idea of Mac Jones maybe somehow stealing this starting job? Was that just noise in your opinion? What are your thoughts there in Foxborough?
Well, I don't know that it's like noise. I think Mac Jones is probably good. So I happen to believe all this time and still believe Cam Newton will be the starter in week 1. But that's not because I was thinking like, oh, Mac Jones just sucks, so Cam can't lose. I thought, no, there's reason to believe Cam will actually be pretty good in this offense and is maybe even uniquely suited to make the most of players like Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, especially. Like, as much as I think Mac Jones is, I don't want to say he's probably going to be good, but I like his chances as much as I can. A 15th overall pick, really. It's like I think he's got a really good shot. I don't think it suits him quite as much, Newton, to have that level of investment in those tight ends, at least when the best receiver is Jacoby Myers and the second best is Nelson Aguilar. Like, I think when Mac Jones takes the field, the Patriots would ideally have slightly better wide receivers than they do, because tight ends like Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith are especially productive when you can play that Cam Newton run threat, and you make the defense face these situations where they can't do more than guess. And if they're wrong, they can't really do much from that point about it. You want to not bite on the Cam Newton run fake. Well, maybe he's not faking it, and now it's first down, and maybe it's a touchdown. So you defend it. Next time it's not a run, it goes to Jonnu Smith. He's not defended after the catch, so he goes 25 on you after the catch. That kind of stuff can't happen with Mac Jones because he's not running off tackle. So I don't dislike Mac Jones, and I'm not thinking like, oh, he's actually bad. Like, when I was among the people criticizing the hype around Mac Jones
at 3,
specifically in the context of going 3rd over Trey Lance, which I was like, no, that's ridiculous. Him going 15th, that's reasonable. I thought he was going to go 12th or 13th, wherever the 49ers originally were before they traded up. I was projecting them to take him there. So 15 is a good pick. I think he's probably not quite as good of a prospect as Tua, but he's probably about as good. That's great. But Cam, I think, still is better than people give him credit for. And the reports yesterday, it was Albert Breer chimed in a couple hours after Tom Curran, I want to say his name was. So that first thing, and I saw some website said, beat writer believes Mac Jones has won the job. To be fair to the beat writer, who I think took a little bit too much editorial liberty, he didn't even say that. He was just giving it. I mean, to be fair to him also, he was kind of saying, like, I'm editorializing. This is just what I think. I think Mac Jones should play. And the headline was listed as, like, they believe that the competition's over and Mac Jones has won it. And that's not quite what it said. But I'm guessing on the basis of seeing that, Albert Breer was like, oh, I got to get in my take on this too. And wow, what a shock that he prefers Mac Jones. Anyway, I don't care what either of them think. I'm waiting to see what Belichick says. And if you think about it, it could be politically a bit difficult to start Mac Jones. Not the least of which being that Cam Newton is beloved by all the players that he plays with. The locker room could be a bit alienated if Cam doesn't get his one shot this year at least. And if you do start Mac Jones week 1, you are basically conceding like a playoff ambition for the season, because you can't bench him. Or you can, but that'll be a political mess too. Can you imagine? Like, Mac Jones gets 2 starts and they're 0-2 and it wasn't very good how he played, and Cam Newton starts, and I can't imagine the whining out of Boston area if that happened. So I think the way that they play this is they're just like happy to have Mac Jones. They're happy that he fell to the 15th pick. They're glad to take him, but they weren't specifically planning on it, and they didn't act as if this was going to be their whole approach. They planned on making Cam Newton the quarterback, and they're glad to have Mac Jones as another option if Cam just turns out to not be great or gets hurt again. And the second thing in particular, we have plenty of reason to think it might happen. So I think they're basically going to run Cam into the ground, or wait until he plays poorly. And if he plays poorly, they'll bench him. But if he plays decently and they're competing, they will not bench him. And he could get hurt. And if he does, that's probably it. But if you start Mac Jones in week 1, you almost might have to cut Cam or something like that. And I think Belichick wants to win some games, and I think he knows Cam wins more.
No, that's a great way of summing it up. Yeah, there's a lot of things at stake depending on this particular decision, and specifically the week one. And this week made things a little bit more complicated. We'll see how things go from here, but I would still expect Cam at this stage to be the guy, but we shall see. Before we get on to some backfield situations that were shaken up over the last few days, quick word from our sponsors. So staying in New England, and welcome back to our stream, people watching on stream. Staying in New England, so Sony Michelle gets jettisoned over to the Rams. The Rams and specifically Sean McVay must have a thing for former Georgia running backs with knee problems. But either way, Sony Michelle is there. So before we get to the Rams, when it comes to New England, what are your thoughts now on Damian Harris? Is this a little bit more streamlined? Do we finally get a situation in New England where the backfield is actually not a complete headache for fantasy purposes? Or, does this elevate Ramondre Stevenson? I've seen strange amounts of JJ Taylor hype on the timeline, which I would advise people to stay away from. But either way, go on. What's going on with your takes in the New England backfield?
I don't have much of one, really. I mean, I think Damian Harris is their best runner. I think on the basis of merit, he would place safely ahead of Ramondre Stevenson, even before considering, the veteran versus rookie part. But Sony Michelle getting traded definitely puts Stevenson closer to the field. And I think Stevenson's talented. The only thing I would wonder is, can he get versed, studied up on his tasks, his responsibilities to the level that Belichick requires, which might be slightly more stingy than most coaches, because he already made healthy scratch rookie years for Damian Harris and James White, both of whom, especially White, not to take away from Harris, but White really turned out to be a good player for them. So it's not to think Stevenson is bad or whatever, to think that he is unlikely to play this year. But with Michelle traded, I think it changes from unlikely point blank to play to unlikely to play unless Harris gets hurt. But I think if Michelle had been there, even if Harris had gotten hurt, Stevenson probably wouldn't have played. And whereas now if he does, I think Stevenson does play. If that happens, I could imagine Stevenson doing pretty well. If he struggles, I would guess it has something more to do with just blitz pickup or something like that. If he has the ball, I think he can run pretty well with it.
So do you think, in terms of applying, those previous cases of these Patriots rookie running backs really not seeing the field, could that be a bit of a Brady thing? And now we have just a different era where we don't have a quarterback that's just as picky with what their running backs next to them do, to where, maybe this is a little bit different when it comes to Stevenson?
I guess it's possible, but I mean, sorry, that was my bad. I know that I just mentioned Damian Harris and James White as examples of rookies not playing, but they also had Sony Michelle as a rookie, and they put him on the field right away, and that showed that they could be pushed toward that outcome by political necessity, basically. We took this guy in the first round, we got to put him there.
Right.
So, Bill, you're making a special exemption for this guy, so they could get a rookie on the field if they really wanted to, I think. And it's just not in Belichick's inclination to do that as soon as some other coaches might. I think either way, though, it'll take an injury. And if they take if Damian Harris does get hurt, then Belichick doesn't really have the luxury of worrying as much about, the dots over the I's. He just has to kind of be well, who's here? Ramondre Stevenson. That's it. So you got to play then. But I just don't see. I mean, Damian Harris was a really good player at Alabama, and he started ahead of Josh Jacobs at Alabama for a reason, I think we can say in hindsight. But Stevenson was really good as 7-game starter at Oklahoma, but as a prospect, he's just not particularly close to Harris, and Harris is a veteran.
Yeah, no, that's all very true. I mean, I like Ramondre Stevenson. I think that
I like him
he's
too. And
right. And wouldn't say that you don't. And he ran better than Trey Sermon did the year that they were in that Oklahoma backfield. Sermon obviously ended up at Ohio State, and probably has a little bit more fantasy relevance for this year. I think Stevenson is kind of limited as far as his complete skill set is concerned, but I maybe that's crazy to think, and especially as a rookie, but he could be, especially if the Patriots are like that power run team. And I think that Harris can obviously fill those these type of functions as well. But Stevenson, being as big as he is, he could just be that goal line hammer. I mean, 6 foot, 231 pounds. Like, we've seen running backs of similar or lesser talent, score a bunch of touchdowns for the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, the LeGarrette Blount scenario was that was like his second year, and I think that's what a lot of people are thinking of with LeGarrette, with Ramondre Stevenson. Is like, hey, he looks like Blount, but I don't know. I think he's capable if they call on him for it. I just don't really know what impetus there would be aside from injury. Like, I think it's true that Stevenson would be good there, and I think if it comes up, he'll do well there. But in the meantime, Harris can do it too, and I don't know. It's just I think Harris is quite good and not likely to be worse than Stevenson in any real respect.
Do you think I'm in on Harris? I have a bunch of shares. I feel a lot better about having him on my team on the Stake League team now than I did on Tuesday, and I still even then felt pretty good about having him as my RB3. But I don't know, do you think Stevenson at the very least can return value at his current ADP for best ball, like around pick 186, that kind of thing?
I mean, he's in that range. He's a part of like a draft pool where nothing is really certain and upside is kind of difficult to discern. So there are certain things with him that are discernible, clear upside possibilities, like the goal line thing, being as big and powerful as he is. He can catch passes. So I guess I should have said at least not just Damian Harris, but if James White gets hurt, that could be a way for Stevenson to play in passing situations. And we still don't know for sure I'm guessing it's probably going to go to the tight ends, but Burkhead had some targets, some routes that are unaccounted for too. So White probably won't pick up all of it. So there's a couple ways in for Stevenson. And again, if he does get on the field, he is a big guy who has really good contact balance, and he's flexible and relatively quick, and he catches the ball well. So if you're that big and you can kind of take on volume and you can catch the ball, stay involved in passing situations, then you don't need to be like a big playback or anything. And so I think in best ball or anything really, it makes sense because in a redraft league, he makes sense as just a bench stash too. Because if Harris gets hurt, and it's Stevenson's a free agent somewhere, then he's probably the top fab bid that week. And
yeah.
If you can just get players like that in the late rounds, there are worse ways to go about it.
No, 100%. So consider me intrigued by one Ramondre Stevenson, and I think that this Patriots backfield, specifically those top two guys now. Michelle, I didn't really know what to think about necessarily for this season. He hadn't really been on my radar one way or the other. He just kind of felt like this vague potential annoyance, essentially. But now he's gone. And now he gets to annoy the people that went ahead and got Darrell Henderson with like a 4th or 5th round pick. So what are your thoughts like into the process that went into the Rams going after Michelle in the first place, and just kind of how this backfield looks now? Because it did feel a bit like something untrustworthy. Essentially, after Cam Akers gets hurt, it's July. Training camp hasn't really started at that point. They're like, okay, we're just going to, use this time to evaluate what we have in Darrell Henderson, Xavier Jones, Jake Funk. It's like, that's all well and good. And we love to hear that there's not going to be any further change as fantasy guys. But looking at it on face value, they weren't going to go into the season with two completely unproven guys and one pretty unproven guy as their backfield trio. So what's up here?
I think Daryl Henderson's still going to be the clear lead guy. Like this is a boost for Sony Michelle's value. Like he's he was probably going undrafted most of the time in most leagues, and now he's not getting out of the 18th, maybe not even, I don't know, the 12th at this point. Not that I advocate taking him that early. That's just how these things tend to go. When visible news events like this happen, there's usually an overreaction in the ADP. So I'm guessing people are reaching for Sony Michelle, and it's one of those things at that point. If Henderson gets hurt, then yeah, you're glad you reached, I guess. But I don't think he's going to outplay Henderson. I think it was just them kind of acknowledging that, we like Henderson, but it's kind of unreasonable to expect him to play more than 60% of the snaps. So Sony Michelle's here to play 30 of them. And that's all it really is to me. I think it's a little bit weird of a trade, though. Like, I thought it was a possibility. Like, I named Michelle in the article back when Cam Akers tore his Achilles tendon, talking about how I think they're going to trade for somebody. But I was thinking it would be, or if I were them, I would have gone after Royce Freeman or Jalen Samuels, because those guys would fit well with what they do with the Rams offense, and they could have kind of both rehabilitated their value right before they became free agents. Sony Michelle's going to be a free agent, and I think comp pick was part of their thinking, and they were like, hey, former first round pick, look how first round picks get second contracts usually, and it's better than going with the fifth rounder, Jalen Samuels, or the whatever, Royce Freeman, late third, mid third, whatever. So I'm guessing that's why they leaned Michelle, because they thought they would get a better comp pick. But guess what? You don't pay much in free agency with guys who have one knee left, so that's not really going to happen. And if they were banking on that being part of the calculus, then I think they might be a little disappointed. But durability issues aside, Michelle is pretty good. He's not like an awful player. Everybody's got a bitter taste about him because he was drafted too high and people got let down, and some people took him over Nick Chubb, and they're never going to get over that. And that's all legitimate trauma for the people in that situation, I guess. But doesn't mean anything about Michelle. He's pretty good. So I think he'll be pretty good. It's just that so will Daryl Henderson, and Daryl Henderson, if nothing else, is, I think, a little bit more proven as a pass catcher. Like, I think Michelle will do well with like the Akers type targets last year. Akers isn't really like a standout pass catcher either, but he was still productive because the targets that they set up are just scenarios where it's easy to just grab the ball and run. And Michelle can do that. He just, if he hadn't cost as much as the Patriots spent on him, people would think more favorably of him.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Michelle last year, obviously career lows in carries by wide margins. His first year under 200 carries, didn't even make it to 100 carries, did average 5.7 yards per carry. So, I mean, when healthy, like to your point, he's still got some juice to him. It's just a matter of, that health variable is tricky, and it, theoretically it could just get worse by the day. So, yeah, I wouldn't expect him to take on much more than 35% of the workload, like you were saying, in terms of the snaps. But I think it also, any sort of vague hopes for your Xavier Jones or Jake Funk shares, probably out the window.
Yeah, Xavier Jones is playing special teams, and Jake Funk, I don't know, probably doing the same thing, I guess.
I'm still, I have like at least.
He's pretty good. He'll stick around.
I think so. I got a couple late round darts of Jake Funk, but oh well, fun while it lasted, nonetheless. Before we get into some receiver talk here, we're going to talk some rookie receivers and their ADPs on on Underdog Best Ball. We have a couple words from our sponsors. Leading things off, our friends over at WynnBET. If there's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire, it's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decisions. So listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with RotoWire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire Fantasy Podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more at your fingertips. And if you want to break from sports betting, head into WynnBET's digital casino, take a spin on roulette, double down in blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at Baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 with your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WynnBET. WynnBET. the exclusive partner for RotoWire's Fantasy Podcast. We also got a message from our friends over at Dynasty Owner. Are you tired of the same old fantasy football leagues that get canceled after a year or so? If so, Dynasty Owner has your back. Go to dynastyowner.com. New leagues for the 2021 season are forming now. Dynasty Owner unites the fun and excitement of fantasy football with the skill and strategy of the front office by incorporating a salary cap and real NFL player salaries for die-hard fantasy football fans that want the real GM experience. Dynasty Owner adds a whole new level of strategy. Are you worried you won't be able to find anyone to play in your league? Don't worry. Dynasty Owner can help you fill your league with fantasy football enthusiasts like yourself. You won't have to worry about finding enough players. You can choose to start a league, join an existing, or purchase a team from a previous owner. If you're serious about joining the big leagues, go to dynastyowner.com/RotoWire. That's dynastyowner.com/RotoWire and start your dynasty today. All right, Mario, you are working on an article series, really. You posted the first one earlier this week talking about the Jamar Chases and Jalen Waddles, Rondale Moores of the world. Let's cut a little bit deeper here. Talk about your article that's going up on the site a little bit later in the week, talking to some of these rookie receivers. Starting things off, let's go Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit, just because I feel like he's an interesting case in the sense that I really liked him as a prospect. I know that he might have a bit of a capped ceiling to him, but at the same time, Detroit's depth chart ahead of him is just so gross that it feels like there's a pretty good chance that he's a contributor right off the bat. So where are you with Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Yeah, he was a player who I had ranked quite a bit higher pre-draft testing than post-draft testing, because not just among the receivers drafted in the first 4 rounds, but among any of the drafted receivers, he had probably one of the worst size-adjusted speed scores. Was timed at 4.61 in the pro day 40 at, I want to say 197, which if you're running a 4.61 at a pro day, which it might be like a 4.65 at the combine. And if you're running that slow, you want to weigh over 210, something like that. You can get away with it, the bigger you are, especially. He did, to be fair, I think he did at least above average with the agility testing and the jumps. He did quite well. So he has sort of like a short area athleticism to work with. He almost might be, as a prospect category, he might kind of be thought of like Tyler Johnson from last year, who they're both really dominant college players, but they don't have the speed or size to be a classic boundary threat, classic downfield threat, especially. So that tends to force you inward on the field where speed matters less because you're, leveraging less space. So you can emphasize quickness at the expense of long speed. And in that part of the field, Amon-Ra St. Brown, even if you were concerned about his lack of speed, it doesn't really apply in the slot. There, he definitely can function. So the question is, does he get enough slot snaps to be competitive enough, often enough, as a route runner to get the targets and the catches that we want? And I think it could go a few ways. He's, I think, up for the task if it's there for him. I guess what I'm thinking is what kind of workload is really waiting for him. He can't really win reps outside. It's going to be Brashad Perriman. It's going to be Tyrell Williams. Quintez Cephas has been running ahead of him in 2 wide sets. So anytime there's 2 tight ends on the field, St. Brown probably will not be. Anytime there's fewer than 3 receivers on the field, he probably will not be. Sometimes when there are 3 wide receivers on the field, he still won't be because one of those receivers might be DeAndre Swift or TJ Hawkinson. So he's only able to get slot snaps this year, or I would guess anyway. And within that already kind of narrow category, he has 2 pretty significant concerns in Hawkinson and Swift, I think. However, if either of those guys misses time, and especially if it's a game where they're playing catch up a lot, then if they're going 3 wide, there's a good chance he's out there. And if he's out there, there's a pretty, I don't even think it's like a good chance. It's like a lock that he would draw targets per snap at a much higher rate than especially Perriman, also Tyrell probably. So, if he can get 600 snaps, it wouldn't be shocking if he pushed for 80 targets. And if he gets 80 targets, he might catch 60 for 750 and 5 touchdowns or something like that. But I am a little bit I don't know. I haven't gotten any shares on Underdog, I guess I could just say, because
Okay.
he was always going well ahead of Tyrell and Perriman. And at least in their format, the half point PPR, I just prefer those two in a vacuum, let alone at a cheaper price. But it's not because I'm eager to fade St. Brown's abilities. I'm just kind of like, I'm not convinced that he's going to get enough slot reps to kind of give you the volume that you would hope for from a guy who's otherwise maybe efficient. Like I think he'll do a good job. I just don't know if they'll need him to do it as much if Swift and Hawkinson are available.
So, going back to your concern about like that path to playing time, do we expect the Lions to be one of the more like two tight end heavy type of offenses that we'll see this year?
Not really. I can't remember who even their other tight ends are.
I believe it's Darren Fells.
Oh, Fells will probably play. Jesse James isn't there, is he?
No, he's somewhere else, if I remember correctly.
Well, we know what Fells is. He's just a blocker and he can do the end zone thing. He's like Bubba Franks or something like that. Doesn't really do a whole lot before the 20, before the red zone. But he will probably play because he's not a liability out there. He's a good blocker. If they want to run three wide with Hawkinson not playing in line, then Fells could, in a way, take that rep from St. Brown if the alternative is Hawkinson just lining up at tight end in the first place and St. Brown getting the slot snap. So, yeah, Fells is like a manageable, or I don't know what you'd call it, like a negotiable kind of obstacle for St. Brown. And I think that's what all these things are. It's like there are ways he can get through. He definitely has a chance. I would just want people picking him at ADP to kind of like be aware of that range of possibility. And I generally am a little bit lower on him, I think, than most people, because I don't see the upside scenario. Like I can see ways that he only plays like 25 snaps a game and just kind of gets 4 or 5 targets every week, but only catches, 3 or 4 for 40 or something yards. Like I don't expect there to be touchdowns because it's a Jared Goff offense. So I don't really see the upside scenario that makes it worth my time. And I feel like I can get more, like whatever you'd call it, like start viable outings from Tyrell, especially. And it's at a cheaper price. So maybe in full point PPR, it'd be a little bit different, but I'm not expecting touchdowns and I'm not expecting a whole lot of yards exactly, especially if Swift and Hawkinson are available.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that was a good setting of the record when it comes to, or setting the record straight when it comes to St. Brown and the rest of this Detroit offense. His ADP right now on Underdog 157.7. So I mean, that it's a reasonable
early
enough
for me. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I just feel, I guess, like Tyrell and him should not be far apart. Like I think they should pretty much cost the same. But we'll see. St. Brown can play. If they give him the work, he will probably do pretty good with it.
Okay. All right. That definitely checks out. Let's move on over to another rookie receiver. This guy generating a bit more buzz, showing a little bit more flash on his tape thus far. Terrace Marshall. So obviously we have a situation in Carolina where they got Robbie Anderson. They just extended him. They have DJ Moore. He's obviously a budding star. You get Christian McCaffrey back. He takes up a lot of oxygen as far as those targets are concerned, provided he's playing a ton of games. So where does Marshall fit in? And like, how do you, kind of weigh out the two factors where Marshall is like a very talented receiver that definitely has the tools to be a productive guy as a rookie, whereas the just kind of stark reality of so many or such a high percentage of targets going to 3 other guys right off the bat?
So Marshall, I think, is definitely a good player. I think it remains to be seen, like, what kind of good player exactly. I don't think he's definitely not a burner. He was timed at 4.4 flat at a pro day, which probably something like a 4.45, which is pretty good, but he's also a bit skinny at 6'3", 205. So if you're 6'3" and under 210, you'd ideally be a little bit faster than that. But I think it's going to be enough that it's not a liability for his athletic grade overall, for the kind of functions that he projects for. And specifically, I'm thinking like intermediate. If you're going in the middle of the field, intermediate, you don't want it to be shallow. Like lankier guy like him, a lot of what it made him effective in college, and he was extremely effective at LSU. Like he ran behind Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, of course, but he wasn't really less productive than them. And
Right.
last year with those two gone and Joe Burrow gone, obviously, he was better than ever last year. And that's pretty crazy because he took up a huge share of their passing production. Like you look at his per target numbers and his just per target, like yardage, catch rate, touchdowns, everything. It's all very good when you look at him. And I know I was surprised when I looked at the LSU baseline. It was like just garbage. Like
it was rough.
No one did anything except for him, really. I know that freshman Kayshawn Bout or whatever is really good, but
Butte.
He's really good. And with that said, not much was going except for Terrace Marshall before Terrace Marshall opted out, and Terrace Marshall was doing great. I was like, when I looked at Terrace Marshall's box score before the LSU one, and I was like, oh, this next quarterback must be pretty good. And it's like, oh no, actually, he was just way above the team baseline, and that's great to see when a player takes on a bigger share of the offense and their efficiency doesn't suffer for it. That shows that they can not just make some big shots, but they can make a lot of them. Like even when the defense knows it's coming, they still make that shot. So Terrace Marshall showed he's got that level of skill, I think. And in the NFL, if you're using him in, again, like the sideline, the intermediate, the downfield, he should keep winning the way he has in college football. And he's a good route runner. He's not like a physical 6'3". He's more like a finesse 6'3", but he's good at it. He can cut up a defense over the intermediate. That's all great. The problem is, or at least like the confusing part of this for me as it relates to Carolina, is their opening at receiver is believed to be in the slot. Like Curtis Samuel played the slot last year. Curtis Samuel's the one who left. That's what this opening, that's why it's there. But Terrace Marshall cannot run Curtis Samuel's 2020 routes. Like I feel like it's out of the question, actually. Like 7.1 yards was Curtis Samuel's average depth of target last year. I don't think you want Terrace Marshall running less than like 11 and a half average depth of target. It's not that he's bad underneath or something. It's just he's better further downfield. And as far as the underneath specific part goes, I think DJ Moore is definitely better and David Moore probably also better. David Moore kind of played a Curtis Samuel sort of role for the Seattle offense last year. And I think pretty clearly they were going into the draft with David Moore there because they were like, well, if we want to do Curtis's 40 carries in 15 games again, then David Moore can take some of those carries and he can take some of those short routes. But they also signed Dan Arnold, and I think he's going to be a slot receiver. I don't think he's going to play a real tight end much at all, really. That'd be like Colin Johnson playing tight end. Like they're the same thing, 6'6", 220. So I think he's going to play slot receiver, and especially in the red zone, you can imagine a guy tall as him getting involved. So the Panthers have options for filling some of this void that Curtis Samuel leaves. And while Terrace Marshall is probably easily their third most qualified receiver behind DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, it's not necessarily in that one aspect that he would be. It's like he would need to be used differently than Samuel was last year. And ideally he would get outside snaps actually, and just kind of get out of the slot entirely, I think. So there's reason to believe between his production and his athleticism that he will be good. I think though that with so much of his draft hype or, market being informed by these things, like he's running from the slot, he's going to replace Curtis Samuel in the slot. That's like a theory that needs some specifying because they're going to have to change the general complexion of the offense. Like the slot routes, if they're going to be his, need to be 5 yards further downfield than they were last year. And that could happen, but I don't really see people grappling specifically with that and facing down the spatial reality of playing football on a field that is only so big.
No, that all excellent points. Well taken. Yeah. You can't just have him do what Curtis Samuel did. They're totally different guys. So yeah, maybe the big slot becomes the thing in Carolina if that's what ends up happening.
Yeah, I hope they move DJ Moore into the slot more because he's so good after the catch and he could definitely take those Curtis Samuel carries. And Marshall's better outside than in the slot. So I think that's the best case scenario for the Carolina offense. If you invested in Sam Darnold, I would hope for basically those three receivers on the field somehow, and if possible, Marshall more so outside. But we'll see. They have options. They can call it differently, game by game, situation by situation.
Okay, and let's get on. We got time for one more, so we'll go to the nation's capital where Curtis Samuel now plays. But looking at his rookie teammate, De'Ami Brown, out of North Carolina, a deep threat speedster, during his time there, like 20 touchdowns, I want to say, over his last couple of seasons at UNC. He kind of came into the year a little bit neck and neck with Daz Newsome, totally blew him away this past year. Obviously has been generating a good amount of buzz. His ADP over on Underdog checking in at 178. So what's the latest on him? And I guess you can also maybe use this time to mention Curtis Samuel and his lack of practice here so far.
Yeah, so it's one thing to wonder what Dyami Brown is relative to Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, but if Curtis Samuel is just not on the field, then that's a very different scenario. Like I think Dyami Brown is clearly a good prospect. Like, he's much better than Josh Palmer. He's much better than Tutu Atwell. He's much better than Dwayne Eskridge. None of those three should have gone ahead of him. So Washington got a steal where they got Dyami Brown, but Terry McLaurin is a total monster. And Curtis Samuel, people have trouble kind of like getting a solid conception of who he is as a player too, because last year he was only underneath and getting jet sweeps, whereas the year before everybody agonizingly watched him just get wide open 40 yards downfield and Kyle Allen to just sort of feebly throw the ball to the other half of the field. That is confusing people because like they look at, I'm assuming some people look at him going to Washington and think like, oh, he's going to catch 80 passes for 850 yards again. It's like, no, with Washington, he's going to run far downfield this year because Scott Turner has, for some of his slot reps, downfield, like long post routes. And Curtis Samuel is definitely going to run those, and he's definitely going to get open on those if he's healthy, I mean. So now with the groin thing going into like 2.5 months of, I don't know what's going on. It's not what you want to see, even if he's back on the field for week 1. It's not what you want to see because Curtis has had some durability issues in the past too. So I was concerned about Dyami Brown's initial ADP, kind of thinking like, oh, he might get in here and kind of like stake out something and then take it from Curtis Samuel. And I definitely didn't believe that. But if Curtis Samuel's not there, limited, I do like Dyami Brown. It's just, it's a high bar to reach when you're talking players like Samuel and McLaurin. And if Samuel's not there, then Dyami's just a fast guy who scored a lot of touchdowns, It's a good thing to have.
Before you finish that out, we do have a quick word from our friends over at Sleeper. What do your fraternity brother Steve, Katie from work, and your grandma all have in common? They're all waiting for that invite to your fantasy football league. There is no better way to hang out, no easier way to talk smack, and no more customizable platform to host your fantasy leagues on this year than Sleeper. Whether it's you have your redraft leagues or a dynasty league that has been around for 10 years, Sleeper has everything you need in one app. Incredible commissioner tools and customizations, built-in messaging, support for snake draft, auction, draft, and best ball drafts, blazing fast news, scores, and stats, all in a beautifully designed mobile app and website that makes every other app feel like horse and buggy. Sleeper is the fastest growing fantasy sports platform for a reason, and all the cool commissioners are switching to Sleeper and not looking back. Don't just take my word for it. Download Sleeper on iOS or Android and see for yourself. You have nothing to lose. It's free. All right, Mario, finish it out here. Just kind of give your general expectation and the kind of distilled word on what you think of Dyami Brown at his ADP.
I think he makes sense, especially the more we see Curtis Samuel sitting on the shelf. There's going to be 3 wide sets. It's not going to be like a 2 tight end offense. So there's going to be 3 wide sets. Dyami Brown might be their third receiver anyway, but in the slot, he probably can't beat out Adam Humphries, at least not for the underneath routes. So if both Humphries and Samuel are healthy, I'm a little bit concerned about Brown getting his shot, but if he gets his shot, he's probably good, and he is good at getting open deep if Fitzpatrick is still the chucker that we're used to, that suits Dyami Brown totally fine.
No, absolutely it does. So I'm hoping that he does get locked down one of those outside spots and they just, send him deep, so you might be hard pressed to find that week to week consistency for redraft leagues, but for best ball, you could have some absolute spike weeks where he ends up finishing in your starting lineup. That's going to wrap things up for this Thursday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, brought to you again by our friends over at WinBet. We'll be back next week, and Scott Genstad and Andrew Laird will be on tomorrow talking some DFS. Thanks for listening.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/